Not all products in the supermarket are created equal, and I'm not just talking about processed versus unprocessed, I'm talking about the exact same food in the same category, put side by side. Some are just way more nutrient dense, have way less added crap, or just simply have way more of the actual food that's meant to be in there. So I'm going to go through the ones that are worth knowing about, and through the lens of a dietitian, explain why that actually matters. So starting with your canned goods, this really just comes down to the percentage of the food that's in there. So for example, if you're looking at a standard diced or crushed tomatoes, that's got something like 60% of tomatoes in there, whereas the other 40% comes from tomato juice. Now, although it's technically tomatoes, I'd be fuming if I got a can of oranges and half of that was juice. Something like this has almost 100% of the crushed tomatoes in there, and honestly, the quality is night and day difference. If you got your spoon in there, you can really tell, and that one makes your food prep so much nicer. Same goes with your coconut milk as well. When you're getting a home brand one, this has only 50% of the coconut milk in there. The rest comes from water, so that's really watered down. Whereas your premium brands like Euro Yam or other ones have 89%, so a lot more of what's actually in there. For prep, again, this is gonna level it up. A little bit more expensive, but when you divide that over all of your meals, it's worth it in my opinion. I swapped to that recently and it's a game changer. Tuna cans can vary quite a lot as well. Now, obviously, if you're comparing a flavored one to a spring water is generally gonna have more tuna in it. But even when you compare between similar flavors, something like your premium Serena one has 78% tuna in there versus other Green Seas or home brand one has 58%. So again, it's important to read the labels when you're buying this kind of stuff because you want to buy what you're actually getting. When you're talking about protein, first of all, getting stuff from the butcher is going to be way better quality in general, but when you're in the supermarket looking for different stuff, now something interesting is the grass-fed fat is going to be more yellow because their diet comprises of grass, which has the beta-carotene in it, which is vitamin A, which gives vegetables like your carrot and stuff like that the orange color. In terms of nutrient quality, you're getting a little bit more vitamin E and those kind of things. It's also slightly different in taste. But we'll go to the seafood because there's probably a bigger quality difference with that. Starting with salmon, there's a big difference between your wild and just your standard caught ones. If you notice the difference in color, your wild's going to be a lot darker. The reason for that is because salmon, their natural diet comprises of krill, microalgae, and those kind of things, which is high in an antioxidant called astaxanthin, which is what gives salmon its pink color. So with farm salmon, because they're eating corn and a bunch of crap essentially, they don't get any of that in their diet, so they have to add that into the feed. So it does still give it a pink color, but it's never going to be as dark as your wild caught ones. And not only that, I think the farmed process is a bit cooked in general, so I usually stray away from any salmon that's not wild caught. And you do want more astaxanthin in general because that antioxidant, since you're consuming it, you're also getting benefits like immune health, heart health, and a bunch of other stuff. So I think wild caught is the way to go. Then you got your eggs. So there's obviously heaps of different types. You got your cage eggs, cage free range, and pasture raised. It really just depends on how much area they have to roam around and also their feed, because if they're pasture raised, they're eating more grass, bugs, and those kind of things. The pasture raised ones do have a little bit more omega-3 and other nutrients like vitamin D and stuff like that. It's probably not something worth getting super caught up on because the price difference is pretty heinous. Like you're looking at double the cost for your pasture raised one. I think your free range ones are still decent. You're getting a bunch of good vitamins, minerals, and quality protein. So get the one that's more affordable for yourself, but if you can afford it, pasture raised is that next level up. Now onto protein bars. There's a million different ones to choose from. Some are way higher quality than others. If you want your top tier one, something like a beef brisket type thing, you're getting the good stuff and not a bunch of other random ingredients that might make your gut feel a bit cooked. So I really like that one. Obviously price wise it's a bit more expensive. So if you're gonna go for these other ones, the main thing I'd wanna look for is a good protein to calorie ratio. So in general, you wanna look for a 10-to-1 ratio. What that means is if it has 20 grams of protein, you want 200 calories or less. So some of them are pretty decent with that. Other ones are pretty cooked. Grabbed a random one, but if we'll use this as an example, 15 grams protein and 200 calories. So not ideal. One that does suit a good protein to calorie ratio is this Musashi 45 gram one, because it has 45 grams of protein and 308 calories. So pretty elite when it comes to that. One thing worth noting, even just in general about your protein bars, is the type of protein that it's using. So you want to look for whey protein because that has all what's called essential amino acids. That's what your body uses to actually build muscle. But if it doesn't have all of them, it doesn't do that as effectively. Compare that to something like a collagen protein, which doesn't have any of those essential amino acids, so it's not really gonna be that helpful for muscle building. This one, I believe, does have a combination of both, so it's probably not optimal. But even when you're looking for other things like protein waters, it's gonna have a lot of collagen. Some of the bars in here in general only have collagen, so make sure you look in the back and it says either whey or casein or something like that. I mentioned before, some people do have a bit of gut issues with this. The reason is because some of these sweeteners they put in there are sugar alcohols. So if you look for something like xylitol, maltitol, anything ending in OL, in higher amounts that can cause a lot of water rush to your gut, so you get the runs. So for some people who are a little bit more sensitive, you want to veer away from this and try find ones that either don't have that in there or even just go for your beef protein bars. Then you got your olive oils. So you got regular olive oil and extra virgin olive oil. The difference between the two is how they're processed. The regular olive oil is processing the olives using heat or chemicals, and in that process you lose a lot of the good antioxidants and stuff that's in there, whereas your extra virgin is made by just cold pressing the olives, so you still retain a lot of that. You also want to make sure the olive oil you're buying is in a glass dark bottle, because if it's not, then it can be oxidized a lot more easily, which then kind of has the opposite effect you want from reducing inflammation from the good stuff that's in there. A lot of people choose regular because of the cooking. It does have a higher smoke point, but I personally would just cook with butter instead. And the reason why butter and ghee and these kind of things are a little bit better to cook with is because they're saturated fats. So what that means is the chemical structure is a bit more stable, so when it's exposed to high heats, it doesn't get fucked with, whereas the other ones and like your canola oil and stuff like that does at high temperatures, so it changes it to a degree where it's just not great for overall health. I always hear saturated fats aren't ideal for health, which yes, if you're having a shit ton of it and it's increasing your ApoB and overall like bad cholesterol, then it can be a problem for heart health. But if you're getting your bloods checked and just having a regular amount of it, it's completely fine. Your body still needs some. I think it just gets demonized too much. Well, I feel like it gets either way. Like people either say it's fine to have unlimited amounts of, other people say you need to minimize it extremely. Somewhere in the middle. I think the most important thing is just to check how your body's responding to it and get your blood work checked. Maple syrups. So you either have something that says 100% pure maple syrup or like a maple flavored syrup. Completely different products, to be honest. Your pure maple syrup is just 100% maple syrup, and a lot of people don't realize that it actually has some antioxidants and nutrients in there, which is pretty decent for health. Whereas your other ones is essentially just sugar, caramel flavors and things like that to make it taste like this one. And just a quick note with your sugar-free maple syrups, it is way lower calories, so it can be a decent one if you're dieting. But again, just drawing back from the protein bars, it has a lot of the sugar alcohols in it. So if you're having a lot at once, it can be quite sensitive for the gut. So if you are sensitive to that, I'll just be mindful of using a heap of this. Then you have your spices. Again, there's a massive difference from what's actually in there. So when you look at something like a old Del Paso, the first ingredient is sugar, the second ingredient is rice flour. So what that means is the majority of this is just sugar and flour, whereas your mingle seasonings, it's really just herbs and spices. So garlic, onion, paprika, cumin, so a lot more of the whole foods, and cheaper. Same kind of thing with sauces too. I'm using mingle again as a good example because it just has less of the added stuff into it. The standard second ingredient is sugar, whereas this has your whole foods, so tomatoes and other herbs and spices. When you look at the label as well, this has 4 times less sugar overall. So if you're thinking about your overall health, these ones are a lot better to go for. The type of honey is also worth knowing about. So in general, you want to look for something that says raw or unfiltered. The reason why is because this one is grabbing the honey straight from the beehive and putting it straight into the jar. And what that does is it keeps the enzymes, antioxidants, and bee pollen in there, which is actually quite good for your health. It's got a lot of different nutrients in there, which is worthwhile having. Whereas your other types of honey, like your regular and standard ones you might find elsewhere, what they do is they grab the honey from the beehive and heat it above 40 degrees. And what that does is it does reduce the crystals that are in there. So when it's on the shelf and when you're eating it, it's a little bit more appealing aesthetically. However, that heating process loses a lot of that good stuff. So in general, something like this is worthwhile grabbing, and something in a glass jar is better as well. Peanut butters is a classic. Some of your standard ones have 85% peanuts in there, whereas your other ones like this have 100%. So obviously you're getting more of the peanuts and the good stuff. One way to tell as well if it's good quality is if it has the oil on top, because what that means is it doesn't have stabilizers and emulsifiers in there mixing it all together. So something like this, it's all kind of blended, whereas something like that, the oil on top is just the peanut oil, which is a pretty good fat, so worthwhile grabbing that. So next you have your breads. Now obviously there's a million different ones to choose from. You have white, whole grain, wholemeal. The difference is really how much of the actual grain is still in there, and the more it has, essentially the more fiber and nutrients it's going to have. My general rule of thumb when looking for a standard bread, I think around 150 calories for 2 slices is a pretty good calorie amount. And if you have more than 5 grams of fiber, that's also a good one. Now the reason why I have sourdough in my hand is because there is actually a pretty big difference from what's on the shelf and what's from a bakery. How this is made is you get the wild yeast and the live bacteria in there breaking down the phytic acid. And when that breaks down some of the gluten in there, so it's a little bit easier to digest and tolerable for some people. It also makes other nutrients more bioavailable, so you absorb it more. So one's from the actual bakery, and you can see it on the label with the number of hours that it's been left there to ferment, whereas your ones on the shelf pretty much just made and then baked straight away. So it's still sourdough probably like bread, but it's not gonna have the benefits of breaking down that phytic acid. Now with your fermented foods, so the main thing to be aware of is the difference between what's in the fridge and what's on the shelf. The reason why a lot of people go for fermented foods is because of the probiotics that are in there, which essentially means it has bacteria in there, which is gonna help with your gut. The stuff in the fridge keeps them alive for a lot longer. So these ones are going to retain way more of them, whereas the ones on the shelf, what happens with those is they're heated to make it stay on the shelf for longer, but in that process it kills all the bacteria in there. So essentially you're just eating cabbage with vinegar, whereas this one has the other benefits. Now that we're here, I'm just going to quickly talk about dips. Now this is just across the board. Some dips are going to have way more of the actual chickpea or food that's meant to be in there versus other ones. When we talk about hummus, this Willow Farm brand, it's the highest of what I've seen. This has 86% chickpeas in there. Other ones have around 60%. I've even seen lower in some examples. So what's left over is mainly going to be oils and other stuff that's probably not ideal. Cheeses are an interesting one. Something I recently found out was the difference between feta with 2 T's and the feta just with 1 T. Now nutrient differences isn't crazy. It's more just comes down to the taste. The one with the single T though, that's authentic Greek cheese. That's going to be with sheep and goat's milk, whereas the one with the double T is going to be from cow's milk. This also has to be from Greece as well, so it's got this PDO thing, so essentially just like a labeling term to have the 1 T, whereas the other one with 2. Same goes with the halloumi. The 1L is your standard one. The one with the double L is from Cyprus. Same goes with your Parmesan cheese. Now you have your Parmigiano Reggiano. I had to say that. This one, again, just with the labeling stuff, when it has that name, you know it's been aged for a lot longer, 12 months or even longer. When it does that aging process, the taste becomes a lot more punchier, whereas your standard Parmesan, it's kind of just mass produced, doesn't get aged like that, so a little bit different in taste. The difference in yogurts is worth knowing about. So you have your regular yogurt, and how that's made is they just get milk left to ferment, whereas your Greek yogurts, they get that same yogurt that's fermented, they strain it, so get rid of a lot of the water that's in there, and because of that, it's a lot thicker, but it has a little bit more protein. And then you have your Greek style yogurt, which is honestly most of the kind of Greek labeled ones in here. Why this one's Greek style is because they just get the regular yogurt, they add in things like milk powders to make it thicker, so it tastes like a Greek yogurt, but it hasn't actually done that straining process, so it's a little bit different. Massive difference with the granolas. Something like this and a lot of your cheaper ones, it's mainly just got oats, sugar, and oils in there, so in my opinion, you're probably just better off buying oats and adding some shit on top. Whereas you have other ones like this, which are pretty much nuts and seeds. A lot more expensive, but you're getting way more fiber, magnesium, and other good nutrients for you, so worthwhile buying that to actually get the health benefits. If you're concerned about the price, there's a really good one from Aldi for $7.99, whereas this is like 14 bucks, so shop there and get your granola from there instead of buying your cheaper ones like this. With your nut bars, similar story to your granola. Some are going to have a lot more nuts and seeds in there, whereas other ones have a lot more sugar and oils, so just have a look at that. With your juices, I feel like a lot of people know just subconsciously that the ones in the shelves are probably less nutrient dense than the ones that are 100% juice in the actual fridges. The reason for that though is because these ones, how they make this is they get the fresh juice, take the water out of it, so it's a lot more concentrated, and then that's just a lot easier to transport. But then when they go to put it back on the shelves, they re-add the water back into that concentrate, and in doing so, apparently it reduces the vitamin C content a little bit. So overall, it's worthwhile going for the ones that are in the fridges instead of this stuff. That's probably everything for today. I'm probably gonna do a separate one just for snacks because I could go balls deep on that as well. But if you found this one interesting, hang around because I'll be doing many more like this.